What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hustling Sideways podcast. I'm Alan Halas. I'm a music writer.
And I'm Jim Love, and I'm a keynote and motivational speaker.
And this is the Hustling Sideways podcast. When we don't have guests on our show, like we've had the last few weeks.
Couple times.
In between that, we have some great bonus content that we do where we talk about our own side hustles, our own passion projects.
Things that we go through.
Things that we've been going through.
Yes. And today, I had an idea. And I texted Alan about the idea, which is always how these work.
Generally,
humans
day
operate.
of.
Yeah, day of.
Day of, it's how
a little behind the scenes. But I was thinking about what it means to discover your lane. Yeah. And I'm not saying to stay in your lane because I don't like that comment, but discover where you're best at. And that happens in a side hustle as time goes on. You start having experiences of where you know you're going to shine the most. Right. And I've had these pretty recently, where and it's been 10 years, which is kind of wild. But as I've gotten more and more experience and I've gotten to do more talks, I'm like, where do I serve best in? And so one of those things that's popped up is I speak at schools, right, like all the time, and which is fine. But if I do a full school, like not all those students are going to be engaged, and I would say most of them aren't, and that's not their fault, especially if it's like a random day. If it's one thing, if it's like a leadership day or like a service day and you're bringing in the speaker to kick off that thing, that's a little bit different. Yeah. But just to go into a school randomly and I do my thing doesn't always work that well. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some students I'll connect with and that's fine. But like literally a couple of weeks ago, I was at a school, really good school, but I did my thing and I was just like, that was kind of a long one. There's students just didn't want to be there. And there's nothing I could do about that. Like I tried, I was like really,
trying to get
a lot of energy and just going, and they were just like not feeling it. And that is what it is. So I realized walking away, I'm like, okay, where am I best served? And I know that it's with actual student leaders, like people that have some level of interest in being a better leader, or like get picked to go somewhere, or have something inside them that like wants to go. And I could tell these students all day long that like, you're great and you're awesome, we're gonna do this. And if they don't care, they don't care. Not much I can do about that. So I left and I was like, that was fun. It was a good experience. Obviously, like always happy to speak whenever. But like, where's my spot? And so these schools, oftentimes I'll say, like, if you have a group, let's say there's 500 seniors in that school, and 100 of them are like students that might be really good leaders, like, let me speak to that group. Sure. Like, that's the one I want. And I will never say no to speaking to a large group, like, just be clear about that. Like, I will always do that. But oftentimes I walk away, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that day was great, and the students walked away, they were like, that day, but I just wasn't. I could tell it, like, back and forth.
You're looking for an engaged audience.
Interesting. And these students were like, the whole time, and I'm like, I'm going cray. Like, I am doing like the way, like, I'm like going nuts, and it is what it is, right? So I think when we're like, you're not going to be everything for everyone, and that's something I've started to realize is like, I may just have my avenues where I focus on more. And so going off the word intentional, as I've picked for 2025, right? That's something I want to focus on, is where am I best at, and to be in that place as much as I can.
Sure.
And that's all to say that I will never say no to a gig unless it's like totally off kilter and like doesn't align with my value. Like if it's a gig about like killing puppies, I probably won't.
Probably don't take that one. I would honestly, maybe don't.
Maybe we won't be there. But like generally, right? Like I can usually serve well at someplace, but I know I won't be nearly as effective in those places. So I want to be really intentional about being that. But I would say that, like, it's weird to say this, but after giving 100 talks, like, I've started to recognize this. And like, usually I'm like, oh, I'll go anywhere and be fine. It's like, I have spots where I know I'm going to be really, really better at. And so that was a more of a recent realization, which probably should have taken me not this long to recognize that, but it is what it is. And here we are. And now I know where I really want to focus. And that's like on the people that want to be in that room, or at least like students and or employees or humans that are just motivated and want to be ready to rock. That's where I'll always be.
Yeah. And I think that's actually, that's valid to learn it years and years down the line too. Cause I think the realizations for me too didn't happen until they were years in. So I have two things that are really like, worse. No, it's, I think like, and you evolve and you grow and you develop a pattern over it, right?
Yeah.
You eventually kind of get a little more granular with it and be able to say, like, this is what, like for you, I know that you like a motivated student.
Right.
You know what a motivated student looks like now, because you've done 100 of these.
Right, where they're going to be, right? Like, I know, like, this room will probably have students I want to speak to.
The first time you walked in to talk to those students, you wouldn't be able to tell, like, who was the leaders in there, who was the whatever, right? Like, you're just, because you're just so blind to it that you're like, you see.
And now it's something you just know. It's like, okay, like, this particular context and situation will likely have the ones I want to speak to, or it won't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but sometimes, again, I guess I'll go back to like one time I spoke at like a middle school, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, which is not my realm.
Right.
And it was one of the best talks I've ever given because they were excited. They were like ready to be there. And the message, like a couple parts I sort of left out, like the really deep stuff, but like I turned up and they had a blast. And I was like, oh, like, so every now and then I'll be a little bit surprised. But then this school was just like, and I'm like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, it's a really good point.
Sure.
Up, you know.
So for me, for writing about music, there's two things that I know are my lane that I over time developed as well and was able to kind of identify as like, this is what breaking and entering does differently and what I do as a writer differently. I think the first thing is I genuinely care about discovering an artist that is maybe not necessarily overlooked. They just haven't had a shot yet.
Right.
So like in the media landscape in Milwaukee, there's, you know, the newspaper, there's radio stations. They tend to gravitate towards some of the same artists because they've learned about it from the other major outlets, right? Like, so it creates this situation where, you know, 8 to 10 people really get a lot of coverage because they just happen to break through already. I think my specialty is totally finding some of the artists that necessarily are, maybe they're putting out their first thing. Maybe they're, you know, just like, because of the way that I go about finding artists to listen to and put out, the way I go to discover music is different than what those outlets are doing. They're looking for something vetted because they don't have time to do it, right? And I just kind of have time, or I have my way of finding, you know, you know, younger artists and giving them more exposure and listening to them and kind of thing. So I've found that my lane is totally like finding those brand new artists that are just getting it figured out, but you can identify talent in that, and you can see like there are X factors that if you hear these certain things in an artist, for me, I can identify that for sure. Yeah. And I know that, you know, the influence of what breaking and entering has done is that over time I've seen those major artists start to pick up on the artists that I've covered. Yeah, nice. Because so they found them on my site and like are willing to even tell me, like some have even told me like, look, I found them on your site and now I'm playing them on the radio. You're validated. Or I found them, or you know, we're writing about them. That's and whatever. Cool. Yeah. So like there is value in that for me too, but like that is definitely something that it has been my, like, one of my strengths for sure. In finding that. I think the other thing that I'm really solid at doing is not only like finding those young acts and being able to put them on, but also like being able to sift out what is, you know, what feels authentic versus what doesn't. That makes sense. And so like when some artists are just in it to make money. Some artists are in it to, you know, really craft themselves, or like they have those skills, right? You can tell pretty quickly, I would imagine. Yeah, exactly. And so like that is definitely a lane for me, is to discover like when somebody is generally cares about their craft. And it's weird because we talk about passions and side projects, so you don't want to ever be like, well, this person isn't passionate. Yeah. But you can discover who like really puts in the work. Totally. And so like that is something for me. It's critical. You have to be able to do that and to do it in a way that's true to you. That, and then reinvent what that looks like too, like figuring out like the social trends of where people pick up music. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. We were a blog, and sometimes we do playlists, and sometimes we do videos, and sometimes whatever. Like being able to shapeshift a little bit and take those things that are authentic and be like, here's really good talent, you should know about this. And I can put it into a platform that people can go consume it. Yeah. That, you know, going where the attention is. Yeah. Yeah. You know, 10 years ago, I might have written a blog post about somebody. Now I might make a TikTok about them because of just the attention. Evolve a little bit. So, yeah, I love that. So doing things like that I mean, like over the course of years, and that's again a thing that you only discover years and years on, is what you're really good at. Figure it out. That's a good point. You know, experiences creates that sort of thing. Experience does that. So we want to know when, you know, how do you find your lane? What is your lane? Yeah. What is your lane? When did you discover it, and what is it? Where are you best at? Yes. So in the meantime, our lane is creating this podcast for you. And I think we've been pretty good at it so far. I call it that. We are the Hustling Sideways podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of the places, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. We have an email as well if you want to be a guest here on this show. It's hustlingsideways@gmail.com. And Jim, keep on hustling. We will see you next week. Peace.